why. And this is like sort of a metaphor for our faith tradition. We're trying to understand this thing that we're in relationship with that's so vast and so much bigger than us. And we're using
When fear starts shaping how we see our neighbors, how do we keep our hearts from hardening? My guest today is Erin Hoagland, who is the Executive Director from the Center for Interfaith Cooperation in Indianapolis, Indiana. We look forward to this conversation with her as we talk about fear and suspicion and polarization in our world and how we can maybe bring unity and healing in this time. Welcome, Erin. It's good to have you here.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
As I mentioned in my introduction, this is such a time in which we're feeling a lot of suspicions. People are feeling fearful of our neighbors. And how do we keep our hearts from hardening in times like this?
Yeah, it's such a great question. And it's something I'm often asking myself even these days is how do I maintain open-hearted living and an open mind when it feels like I have to protect myself. And I think one of the big principles that I like to emphasize through our work at CIC, but just in general in my work in ministry, really as a life philosophy, is this ethic of curiosity, of deeply seeking to understand another person's perspective and why they might feel the way that they feel. Even if it's something that we absolutely could not get behind or we absolutely could never agree with morally or ethically, trying to understand where a person is coming from and practicing, really, it's a practice of compassion, I think, more than anything of, okay, this person thinks so differently from me about this issue in a way that feels morally questionable. I can't understand morally how they could have this position, for example, about our immigrant neighbors or anything along those lines. And how could they feel so aggressively about this issue or about that issue? And the best way is to open our hearts to understanding where they're coming from and why they may feel the way that they feel, to seek a deeper understanding of what's the story behind the person that has led them to the beliefs that they hold. Even if it leads you to the understanding that this person is not someone that you could ever be in community with because of their moral principles, or it leads you down a rabbit hole that says, well, this person has, morally questionable values. It is at least an exercise of compassion that I do think even just practicing that, seeking to understand, keeps us from hardening our hearts and otherizing every single person, to understand that there is a story and a reason why people think the way that they think and are motivated to have the opinions that they have or the values that they have, why they might hold on to them so strongly.
What do you think is the reason that we're feeling such fear right now and such a suspicion of others, that it's so, people are so hardlined and now not even really open to curiosity or to hear one another?
I have lots of thoughts on this. As humans, we're wired to be adverse to change, because if things are changing, it means we have to adapt, and we're wired for survival. And if we're wired for survival, then we're wired to be looking for threats and looking for traps, any kind of thing that might be out to get us, right? So I think in our biology, this is sort of part of our makeup, is where's the trouble? If there's change, there must be something bad's going to happen, right? I have to figure out something new because I have to survive. This is sort of an essential aspect of our biology. Well, we're not necessarily trying to survive lion attacks anymore, at least not in the United States. We're not in that situation. And we have reached such a level of technology and medicine and everything, definitely again here in the United States, that we can acquire levels of comfort that needing to survive isn't quite as necessary. So that's an overdrive. Because of also the amount of change that has come with the advent of technology and social media. We're constantly being bombarded with news from around the world, chaos, trauma happening all over the place. Our attention is constantly being divided. Marketing media is constantly bidding for our attention. I call it sort of the ADHD inducing machine, like the social media handles, the iPhone, the phone. It's the smartphone, I guess I should say, is just seeking our attention and seeking us to have divided attention. And so now we're in stress all the time because our attention is constantly divided. We're being bombarded constantly with different stressors from around the world, horrible news lines that sell, right? Because that's also an aspect of that. So whatever is being inflated in order to sell media. And then on top of all of that, our world has become more diverse. You know, we're a global society now, and there is fear conflated with all of these other changes that we are surrounded with. We've just got layers and layers and layers of things coming at us. So many changes that have happened so fast, and we've become more diverse in a global society, which is more change, even if it's, you know, I think good change, beautiful change. Diversity propels us forward and helps us grow and helps us challenge our own worldviews. But a lot of people, on top of all of these other issues and layers, wired the way we are as human beings without our biology really being able to fully catch up and take one change at a time intentionally, we're just completely overwhelmed as a society.
And so if somebody who's feeling a lot of that, as you describe, and I think that's very accurate, that many of us are feeling those, what are some suggestions that you would offer to them, maybe that you've tried for yourself, but to help us to let go of that anxiety or fear, to try to find our center again?
I think grounding and anchoring is everything right now. And what I mean by that is like know thyself, know yourself, know who you are and why you feel the way you feel. Like this is the first place to start. Why do I feel the way that I feel? Why is this comment making me feel this way? What emotions are coming up for me? I mean, I think this is the beginning of anyone's journey who's trying to begin a journey of self-regulation in a society that is constantly full of noise and constantly bidding for our attention and constantly full of change. What are our anchors? For me, that also looks like spiritual anchors, religious anchors. How do I center myself spiritually? Where is my emotional and spiritual center? And for me, that looks like meditation, and prayer, solo prayer, and spending time in the woods, literally touching grass like this. These are the things that I know for me are anchors.
That's very helpful. I think that's a very, very positive way of not getting overwhelmed and pulling kind of within ourselves. You mentioned an aspect about that was a spirituality, and you are a minister in the Episcopal Church, as well as being the executive director of this interfaith organization. But being coming out of the Christian tradition, you know, many people who found their faith in the Christian tradition were taught that Jesus was kind of the only way, that, you know, that people who are Muslim or Hindu or other faiths really are not at the same level or same place that Jesus offers to us. And so how do you reconcile that? You know, of course, the one verse that many people say is Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. And how do you reconcile being a minister in the Episcopal Church, but also being involved in the interfaith work?
Yeah. So that passage to me is not interpreted, and the way of Jesus, what I know of Jesus, my relationship with Jesus, and the way that's interpreted is really Jesus was an enlightened one, and for me, the Son of God. Do I think God is so small so as to act through only one entity on this earth or even in this universe? No. I think God is so big and so much bigger than any one line of thinking or any one tradition could offer. Jesus is a way, a truth, and a life, and a light forward. I think for the people of that time in that context, Jesus was the way that was being offered that was revolutionary at the time. That doesn't mean to me that there is only one way to God or any one way to a whole life, a fully realized life, a fully realized self, salvation, whatever language, insert whatever language there, right? Because to me, God is so much more than just one narrow path. God is multifaceted, does not belong in a box. And when we put God in a box, that's us being afraid of trying to understand more than we can really fathom, right? God is infinitely mysterious, therefore infinitely knowable. And Richard Rohr said that, so I don't want to take credit for it. But God is mysterious and therefore infinitely knowable, meaning that God is knowable to us in so many ways, shapes, and forms, and is so much bigger than what we can understand. And I think God knows us and knows our brains and knows our capacities and gives us opportunities and invitations wherever we are. And Jesus was one of those invitations and one of those opportunities. And there have been many invitations and opportunities and revelations as paths towards God, and towards enlightenment and towards self-actualization. And so for me, I think to believe that there is only one way is fine. I respect that belief. I think it limits God. And I never want to be in a position where God is limited, because then God's in a box and God's not infinite. And to me, God is infinite and infinitely knowable. And so there is no way that God could ever be just one thing. So I hope that answers your question fully
Well,
there.
I think
Yeah.
of course, I feel in line with that myself, but growing up in the Christian tradition, and I think some people grow up with a certain idea of God that they no longer buy into, the idea
That's
of
right.
all knowing, all powerful, this being out there beyond us. And yet they've let go of that. But now they're trying to have an understanding of, how do I understand God then? Is
Yeah.
God just when we say it's higher power, it's consciousness, it's
Right.
how do
Right.
you help somebody understand how God works in our life and God is a part of that beyond us?
Oh gosh, yes, gosh. I love talking about this. So and this is reminding me of some other things I wanted to say about that in terms of interfaith work. I'm so grateful for the interfaith landscape and the interfaith world, because being in interfaith work and hearing the stories of the Buddha, or hearing stories of Brahman, or hearing stories from the Jewish faith or the Muslim faith helps me add a quality to my lens that sharpens my lens just a little bit through my Christian telescope, so to speak. So um, I like to call it telescope theology, where we're all looking through our telescopes like we're finite, we're confined to this physical body in this physical space in this time. And we're looking up at this vast cosmos and we can't see the whole thing, right? And we're looking through it at this one section of the sky. And this is like sort of a metaphor for our faith tradition. We're trying to understand this thing that we're in relationship with that's so vast and so much bigger than us. And we're using this tool, right? Our religious tradition is that tool that's helping us point to this big picture, this big, beautiful thing that we are in relationship with. And everyone has a telescope that has a different vantage point and a different angle at the vast cosmos. And we all, like in the interfaith world, get to look through each other's telescopes and kind of add to each other's perspectives, or maybe see something through our own telescope that we didn't see before because they've been looking through a different telescope, right? So they have fresh eyes, different context, that they could come in and see something that maybe we didn't see before. And vice versa. And so there's just so much beauty and so much richness in the interfaith world, adding to what we already believe in our own faith tradition and religious tradition. And spiritual abuse is something that I like to talk about. I don't like to talk about it. It's a terrible thing, but it's something that I advocate for knowing more about, because I do realize and am very aware of the fact that many people have suffered religious trauma, particularly in the West under Christian traditions, that have said there is only one way, or if you're LGBTQ plus, you don't belong here, or there's something deeply wrong with you and flawed if you are X, Y, and Z, right? This, to me, that is not of God. That is of human need. To put things in an orderly fashion because we're too afraid of what we do not know and do not understand. And God is so much bigger than that. I don't think God makes mistakes. And for those who don't even necessarily believe in God, I still say to them, you know, maybe God is too hard to be in relationship with because of how you were treated as a kid growing up, or maybe Jesus is too much of a loaded term because all you can see is this abusive person behind that, which is so sad, right? This is part of the religious trauma that I'm just so sad about, that they've taken this person I love, Jesus, and they've used Jesus to hurt other people. I think Jesus would be so devastated. I mean, I think Jesus is probably devastated, looking down at me like, what are you guys doing? This is awful. But that's just my humor brain. But like, I think people who don't have a belief system in a God does not mean they don't have a value system. And it also doesn't mean that they don't have a spirituality. I often say, you know, we want everyone at this table, even people who don't believe, because that is a spiritual perspective. And it is a faith perspective, because we don't know one way or the other when it comes down to it from a scientific perspective, whether or not God exists. So we're all going on faith here, one way or the other. And we all have value systems, and we have to be in conversation with each other in shared community about our value systems, especially in order to come up with a system that works for all of us. And we can't let one value system dominate the narrative. We have to open the door to let multiple value systems have space at the table. And that includes people who don't believe in a God. And like I like to say too, we humans are spiritual beings. We have a desire to express ourselves emotionally through art, through music, through gameplay, through creativity, whether that be through hard sciences or the arts. Like, we have a desire to innovate and create. This is who we are as humans. So just because you don't belong to a gym or have a gym membership doesn't mean you don't have a body, right? And so just because you don't belong to a religious tradition or believe in a God doesn't mean you aren't a spiritual person with a value system that has a place at the table to be in conversation with other religious systems and their values. I just don't think we make space for them, and we should.
Yeah. Well, in fact, and here's a wonderful picture of you with this gentleman who's Hindu. This is a perfect example of you're talking about, you know, with a different telescope, now engaging with somebody of another faith tradition. Tell me what's happening here, and what was this experience?
This was a lovely opportunity. The folks from our Hindu community here in Indy asked if they could come and celebrate a holiday that I wish I could say in their formal language, but it is celebrating universal brotherhood and interconnectedness. And it was in August. And the ritual was to anoint one another on each other's heads, and also to tie this bracelet. As you can see on my hand there, the little orange palm and the red string. And we tied these on to each other as an act of interconnectedness between all of us. And there was about 40 of us there across from each other, one-on-one. We had people of different Christian denominations. We had several Muslims and Jewish friends present, and then all of our Hindu friends were on the other side. And it was just a beautiful moment to say, of course, we can participate in this ritual together and learn from one another, because this is something on which we can all stand on and agree. This is a value we all value, that we're interconnected as a community, as humans on this earth, right? And we can participate in this ritual together and learn and expose ourselves to this beautiful ceremony that you all practice. And they, warmly invited us into. And it was just such a beautiful opportunity to connect in that way. And it feels so special, right? Because it's something so precious, something sacred, something ritual, and you're invited into as another, right? Like we're from the outside of that, and then they bring you into it. It's such a moment of being brought into something so special and sacred and vulnerable. It's such a moment of intimacy, and that's what I love about the interfaith landscape and exchanging values across difference. It doesn't mean we have to agree, but isn't it beautiful to be vulnerable like that? That you would let each other in this way. It breaks down walls. It helps. I mean, talk about hardening your heart. It's hard to have a hard heart when someone has opened themselves up to you in that way, and vice versa. It really disarms people and really feels like a gift. It feels like such a gift.
Yeah, and I agree so much about, as I've learned more about Hinduism and Buddhism and the Baha'i faith or other faith traditions, it really has expanded my understanding of God and my really depth of humanity. And, I think it's part of that when people, just to get to know your neighbor, and it's culturally as well as faith, but it's having that curiosity, I think, that we began this conversation with, being able to be open and asking questions, and just asking. Sometimes you say, I think we're always afraid to embarrass ourselves when you see somebody with a turban, and you want to say, well, now why is that you wear that turban, and we're afraid to know, but yet that's the way people begin, because they love to talk about their faith tradition, don't they?
Yes. No, ask the question. Please ask the question. It's so much better to be curious. And it's okay to not know. You don't need to know. It's like there's a fear that people have of not knowing, or appearing as if they don't know something, or sounding stupid, right? No, this is great. You're letting yourself be humble. It's like, I really don't know much about this. Can you tell me more about it? What does it mean for you? Does everyone wear a turban in the Sikh community, for example? And I was surprised even at our recent Festival of Faith that the Sikh community wanted to put turbans on everyone's heads. I was like, wait, is this not like reserved for special, but it was like they were putting it on everyone's heads, which I thought was just absolutely wonderful. So even I continue to learn and learn all the time.
Oh, and I appreciate our conversation today, Erin, and you're sharing some of your journey. And if you who are watching today enjoyed this conversation, I want you to encourage you to subscribe to Sacred Rebel Voices for our future conversations with people of all different varieties of life, artists, politicians, sports figures, and as we explore what it means to be a sacred rebel in our society. Thank you, Erin. Blessings to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jerry.